Hello and welcome to One-on-One on Plus TV Africa. My name is Elsie Godwin. On this episode, we are one-on-one with a mortgage practitioner who has garnered over 18 years experience that span through financial service sector, ranging from mortgage banking through investment, commercial banking, and real estate. His name is Lanre Afolabi. Thank you for your time.
Good morning. It's good to be here, Elsie.
Okay. The housing deficit is estimated to be between 17 to 20 million. There was a time I had this conversation with you, and this was 5 years ago, and we are still where we are.
Yeah.
What is going on?
Well, don't forget that on a daily basis, individuals have been birthed, the population is growing. Secondly, in terms of the what seems to be like lack of movement in terms of provision of affordable, the deficit anyway, managing the deficit. The land use act has not really helped matters in the sense that the stringent conditions and the way it plays out has really limited investors in bringing, in making adequate investment in the industry. That way, he has kind of stalled, the provision of the required housing units. Don't forget that we need about 56 trillion naira and to be, churning out about 2 million houses every year for the next 10 years for us to be able to meet up the gap. So you need a lot of capital, a lot of capital investment in the industry. And until some certain things are put right, that might be a big challenge, in meeting up the deficit, So basically we have to look inwards, look at our laws.
What are the stringent conditions in the Land Use Act?
Basically it's about, the land is vested in government, and in terms of, having to, make investment in it, there are a whole lot of issues involved, which makes investment in that sector, in the acquisition of land, to be a bit strenuous. Also, in terms of building, building right, we also have an issue there. That's why you see a whole lot of houses up there but not occupied. In terms of building, we also have to be able to build right. Therefore, we could also deepen the housing market and of course produce houses for the citizens. What do I mean by providing the right housing needs for individuals? Basically, when you look at the pyramid, where you have the key, people that requires these houses, majorly the low and the medium. But when you see the kind of properties, the kind of houses that are being put up, it's obviously beyond the reach of these cadre of people. So when you say deficit as well, I think the key part of it where we have the deficit is the low medium. In terms of the high end and all of that, you have houses everywhere not working. So we should also be able to build right and build for the right market. That way we would enhance in terms of sorting out the deficit in the industry. Okay,
you mentioned we need at least 2 million units every year to be able to
for the next 10 years.
For the next 10 years to be able to overcome this deficit. And right now, from the statistics we have, we're probably doing just about 100,000
basically.
Yeah.
Basically.
So what does the future hold right now?
Well, not as much to really scare anybody. It's a bit a tough one, and all hands have to be on deck for us to be able to, meet up with the deficit. And before we even talk about surplus, so we're talking, there's a huge potential in the market, but then we have to get our acts right. Basically, the major ingredient is the financing and, of course, building right for the cadre of people that need these houses. Once we are able to get the financing right, for me, I would prefer a situation where we have the kind of intervention we had then during the PTFBs, where a certain amount, from the earnings of government, I think particularly on crude or something, is, put at a separate account, which was used then to build a whole lot of, health facilities, roads, and all of that. If we can have such intervention from government, that would also help. That way, developers can actually go to that pool of funds at a very reduced rate for them to be able to, put up houses and all of that. That way, we're really going to make a lot of progress in terms of reducing the housing deficit. Because if we leave it the way it is now, for the developers to even source for the finance to build the developments and all of that, before you're done with everything, it's way above the affordability level of the low medium subscribers who are meant to key into these opportunities.
Okay, has the mortgage institution been able to reduce the gap in any way?
You will agree with me that mortgages comes in when you have the property standing.
Okay.
Now, if we're talking about the deficit, that means the properties are not standing. So in that wise, it's a bit difficult for the mortgages to kick in, because mortgages is supposed to like assist, individuals in actually acquiring these properties. But where you don't have the properties, on ground, then it's a tall order, for mortgage banks to really do much. But in terms of trying to deepen the mortgage market, I think the mortgage banks have really done a lot in partnership with CBN, NMLC, Federal Mortgage Bank, and the likes. To that extent, of recent, I think December last year, NMLC announced that they were able to refinance up to about 18 billion naira so far, I think from 2015 when they came into bid. That's a good step in the right direction, but it's not enough. We can always do better and all of that. But the key thing is actually the developers, because until you have the developments ready, mortgages cannot kick in. So we have to look at some form of intervention for the developers so that they can keep producing these units, affordable units majorly, because that's where the market really is for this to really have a tangible effect. Also, government has a lot to do. They have a lot of roles to play in terms of having a kind of an arrangement with the developers, be it PPP arrangement or whatever form, whereby we can have this land readily available with infrastructures and all of that. That way, it helps in reducing the cost of the built-up property at the end of the day. And it's also very important for government not, at least in the immediate, not to see the PPP arrangement or whatever form of arrangement they have with developers and the investors as largely a profit-oriented thing. We should look at how to, first of all, reduce this deficit to a reasonable extent, before they begin to think otherwise. Also, we also have to get the building strategy very right. Gone are those days where you say you want a bungalow or you want a building with your compound and all of that. We cannot achieve anything with that. We have to start thinking of really going high up there. Maybe we're even doing 30 floors and all of that. And sometimes, affordability is actually even relative. You can have a flat of 30 million, 40 million in Ikoyi. If you were able to go 50, 40 floors, then affordability also sets in. So sometimes it's not even really restricted to location, but majorly the building idea and the technology deployed to it. So we should look at going really high up there, and also going beyond, the key places, particularly within Lagos. We should open up Ikorodu, open up Badagry, open up Ekpe and the likes. And how do you do that,
Okay, before you mention or you tell us how to do that, let's go on a quick break. When we come back, we'll continue with our conversation with mortgage practitioner Lanre Afolabi. We'll be right back. Welcome back. This is Plus TV Africa, and we are one-on-one with Lanre Afolabi. Before we went on that quick break, you were telling us about how we can open up these areas like Ekpe, Ikorodu to be able to help the housing deficit.
Exactly. Basically, what do I mean by that? If we're really going to talk about affordability and all of that as well, we also have to look at the surroundings. If we're taking Lagos, for example, and that's why I mentioned Badagry, I mentioned the Ikorodu and the likes. But then, for me to go to Badagry, what is in it for me? If I have to go to Badagry now, I spend maybe like 5 hours, 4 hours to get there. So what does that say to you? Infrastructures has to be in place for
I was also going to bring in infrastructure when you talked about high-rise building, because if you're going to get to the point where you're having 30 floors, do we have the power to maintain such buildings right now, especially when it comes to having a lift to get you to the 30th floor? You're not going to tell anybody to walk from the ground floor to the 30th floor. Do we have the capacity to start thinking high-rise?
I believe so. I believe we can. I mean, for a start, we can make it specific, regarding the particular development we're talking about. Cocoa House has been in existence in about 19, way back, and of course it's high-rise. And if they had the capacity to sustain it, then I believe we should be able to also provide the capacities to sustain it. And basically, when you look at high-rise, if you do the economics, if you do the maths, really, it's actually not expensive, because you're talking about economies of scale. So if you're talking about elevator that probably would have been provided for, let's say, 10, 20 families, depending on the level that you're going, you're probably making it available to maybe 50, 60 families. So when you break it down, it's the same cost for the elevator and all of that. So when you break it down in terms of the apartments or families that occupy that particular building, it becomes cheaper. And that's why you have economies of scale in a whole lot of things, even when you do communal living and all of that. So I believe we have the capacity to maintain it. And I believe even not as high as that, we have a couple of office complexes in the Ikoyi and all of that coming up, 10 floors, 20 floors and all of that. And there's always been capacity to maintain it. So I believe so, yes, we have the capacity to do that.
Okay, earlier on you mentioned how the housing deficit is really just about the low-income earners and then the middle income earners. And then this mortgage, key players in the mortgage industry are basically primarily focused on the high-end people also, because like you said, there are buildings to be serviced, right? So who is focusing on this low and medium income earners right now?
Well, it will not be correct if you say mortgage banks are not focusing on the low, medium income earners. But then, mortgage banks are always ready, to provide the mortgage finance to anybody that is interested in taking it. But then it has to be for something. So what I was saying earlier was, if there is no particular housing development or types that matches the income of these kiddo people, then where do we start from? So there has to be provision of houses first before we can match it with mortgage finance.
Okay, but that takes us back to the developers, right?
Yes, exactly.
So what exactly is the challenges they are facing right now?
Majorly funds, and also they also have to be, would I say, dedicate themselves, to also looking at that market majorly. I don't know what it is, but then maybe in terms of access to funds, and by the time you put provision of infrastructures and all of that together, the housing, price at the end of the day maybe becomes unaffordable. But there also has to be some kind of intervention, which I mentioned earlier, regarding what we had during the PTF days, whereby developers can actually go to that pool of funds and maybe assess at single digits or, very cheap rates. Maybe that way, they will be able to provide the kind of houses that would suit the lower middle income earners. If we have properties of 5 million, 3 million and all of that, it doesn't have to be really massive and all of that. It could be one bed and suite. It could be, also that caters for, almost everybody in the society. Okay,
what is the role of the National Housing Fund in the scheme of housing?
Well, it's an intervention, it was set up by the federal government. It's more or less an intervention whereby people can have access, to cheap funds in terms of mortgage finance. But before you can have access to it, you must have been a contributor for a minimum period of 6 months. And the interest rate is about 6% per annum all through the tenure of the facility, which is about 30 years, depending on your age and the cap of 60 years. So, like I mentioned earlier, this fund is there really, but then how deep is the pocket, for the Federal Mortgage Bank to be able to accommodate all their subscribers or all the people that apply for the loans? And also, like I mentioned earlier, too, is a function of the availability of such properties to be able to match what we have on ground. Federal Mortgage Bank, has really done well in terms of the access to minimum of 5 million naira and maximum of 50 million naira. And of recent, even if you are to access 5 million naira, you need not bring any equity. It's 0% equity. So they are also trying, to really make, finance really affordable as well and accessible to, the contributors. Like I mentioned earlier, it's 6% interest rate all through the tenure of the facility, which is fantastic. But then we really now have to ensure that the funds are actually there and working. And outside that, they need to support more the developers in creating or building this housing stock for people to be able to, take advantage or benefit from. It goes beyond the Federal Mortgage Bank alone. I think the state governments also have a role to play, by providing housing access or facilities for their citizens. It's really, really important. I think we have to see it as a very key part, of the government's deliverables, providing housing for the citizenry. But I don't believe the way it has played out that we have, a lot of governments that are not really making housing provision a focus of their government. But, depending on what their key policies are, but I believe it's an important thing because, if you have shelter, you're happy to do a whole lot of things. Your productivity even improves and a whole lot of things, benefits the economy in whole and all of that. So I believe it's important we really set up an intervention kind of thing for the housing deficit for us to be able to move on.
All right, let's go on a quick break. When we come back, we'll discuss on land grabbers and independent land sellers. We'll be right back. Welcome back. This is Plus TV Africa, and we are still chatting with Lanre Afolabi, a mortgage practitioner. So before we went on a break, I talked about land grabbers. We have them. They are popularly called your moneyless. And then we have independent land sellers. How are these people being regulated?
The land grabbers or the...
Both.
Both. Well, I'm not sure they are properly being regulated.
Okay.
Based on the experiences we've had here and there. And those are also part of the issues we have when we're talking about housing provision. Maybe for a couple of developers that, that do not mind, they have a way of reaching out to them and moving forward. But some, it's a turn-off for a whole lot of investors as well. We've had instances where, this so-called Omonile would give you this portion of land. The next minute it's already been assigned to someone else, So I think we also have to look into that direction and make sure that all these issues are properly sorted, for it to really enhance investors into the housing industry. But for now, I'm not sure they're properly regulated. Okay,
so how can land buyers verify the land they want to buy?
Well, you can always go to the lands ministry to do your verification. Go check whether the land is actually properly titled. You have to do your due diligence, basically. But one of such is to go to the land registry to do a search on the land and see whether what you are buying is actually genuine or not. You can also talk to neighbors in the environment to actually, because sometimes some lands, you do all the checks and all of that is correct.
Yeah, I was going to go there because we've seen cases of people come out to say, oh, we did due diligence and all that, and they are facing issues right now.
I agree, sometimes you do your due diligence and all of that, but then, you should also talk to neighbors, if you can. They have the history of the particular land or property you're buying, so they could also give you, certain vital information as regards your decision on whether to buy or not the particular land. We've had instances. I've been involved in a situation whereby we bought the land, legally and all of that. But by the time, we're about to start the development and all of that, somebody else came up, and said he also has an interest in the land, came up with all the things and all of that, but somehow we're able to resolve it. But it's something that government really has to look into. And for anybody that is also making such investment, you should also try and do your own due diligence to ensure that you're buying right. But mostly, check all the papers and all of that. If possible, get a lawyer to help you do all the verification and all of that. Then that also helps.
It's looking like there's problem everywhere in the housing sector right now, because if even the government you have to go to verify lands are not to an extent reliable, so who do you go to? Talking to neighbors and all that, it still doesn't give you that
I would
confidence.
I will not say government is not reliable. Let's say, for instance, now, there's a property, right, that was probably willed to you, and you've done the checks and all of that, and of course it's properly titled and all of that. But the decision to tell is not majorly based on whether the title is valid or not. The decision to sell is also dependent on whether who is selling from the family has the right to sell.
Oh, wow.
So you see, that has nothing to do with government. Now it's a decision within the family. This person that is selling on behalf of the family, does he have the right to sell? If he doesn't have the right to sell and you go ahead to conclude, on the purchase, then the other members will come up and say it's null and void, and of course they can seek redress anywhere. So why I said you should also do your own due diligence apart from the title verification, because if you do title verification on that, it's okay. But then the decision to sell has nothing to do with government.
So after doing the title verification due diligence, you have to do the family verification due diligence.
It's also important if you're buying a property, particularly a family land, to engage almost all of them, or the arrowheads or the representatives of the family, and get them to commit to that transaction, written and all of that. You also should be able to verify that the people that are coming up, are they the main people that meant to represent the family and all of that. So all those things have nothing to do with government. It's basically your own personal verification, in terms of whether it's right to go in or not. So I won't say government has issues regarding that. I don't think so.
Okay, so if you're to advise someone who wants to buy a land to say, this is the best place or the best scheme to get your land and be sure that you won't have a problem, what would you say to that person?
Well, I'm sure there's so many schemes all around that are legit. So it depends on the reason why you're buying in the first instance. Are you buying for occupation? Are you buying for investment? What exactly are you buying for? So when you're looking at, for whatever reasons, you're buying, you have to also be able to do an assessment of the neighborhood to see, determine the rate of our property, improves, so that at the end of the day, you look at it vis-a-vis the ROI on the investment you have made. So for you to really invest in such, you should be sure that the rate of appreciation in that neighborhood is a bit high. That way, your returns on the investment is worth it. Majorly also, you won't want to buy in an area that is not properly serviced in terms of infrastructures and all of that. Because if you do that, then the rate of appreciation is really going to be low, because these are the things that actually drives, how a property appreciates and all of that. So, for me, my advice would be, depending on what the reason why you're buying, take a look at the neighborhood and also look at, the cost benefit of the investment you're making.
Let's talk about the cost of securing a land title. How expensive is it?
It's pretty expensive.
And is that the way it should be?
It's pretty expensive. And these are part of the reasons, too, why we're having the housing deficit. Sometimes you take a mortgage for you to do perfection and do everything you're talking about, even over 5 million naira. It's crazy, and a lot of people will like, why? If I have 5 million naira, why would I want to do that? Even though at the end of the day, whether you take a mortgage or not, you still have to do proper property registration. And I think government has to really look into that, because you have a lot of properties in Lagos that are not registered. Because people look at it, I mean, why would I want to go and spend that kind of money, you know, property registration? But there's so many ways government can actually make money, you know, when they lower, you know, the cost of property registration, you know, for people to key into it. That way you can even be able to say, you know, monitor the number of houses you have in your state, you know, and that way also it helps in determining the population of your state and all of that. There's so many other levies, you know, minor levies that can now, you can now properly monitor, which can add to the, you know, bottom line of the government. But in terms of the property registration, it's pretty high, you know, particularly in Lagos State. It's really, really high, which we're thinking and hoping that the government would have a look at.
Okay, so in 2018, Federal Mortgage Bank of Nigeria launched a digital platform.
Yes.
How is going digital helping to increase transparency and accountability right now? Do you think it's working? Because I know that was the reason.
Yeah, it is working. I think it has also aided the efficiency part of it. You know, gone are the days when, you know, way back then you apply for NHF and probably it takes you 1 year, 2 years and all of that before you get approval and disbursement and all of that. I think they're achieving, you know, a shorter cycle now, 3 months, 6 months, people are getting disbursement and all of that. So I think it's majorly helped. And these are kind of innovations we hope for, you know, to really move the country forward and also help to reduce the housing deficit.
Okay, well, very briefly before I let you go, how possible is it for an average income earner to own a property in Nigeria?
Well, it depends really. It's two ways. Are you looking at buying off the shelf, or are you looking at, you know, constructing yourself, basically? But then, if you're constructing,
for a low-income earner.
For low-income earner.
How easy is it?
Yes, you know, CBN recently introduced the microfinance aspect of it, you know, housing microfinance, and that is majorly also to help the, you know, lower middle-income earners. So it's stage by stage. First of all, you can take loans, you know, to buy a land, you know, which you pay over a period of time. Then you move to the construction side of it.
What's the interest rate of these loans?
Of these loans? For mortgage loans or for?
The one you mentioned, the one CBN set up.
I think it's about 15–18%. I'm not quite sure about that.
I think low-income earners can afford that.
Well, it depends on, for now, for a start, you know, way back then, I mean, mortgages were even priced at 20-something% and all of that. It's a gradual thing, and I know a lot of intervention funds are being worked on, you know, for us to be able to achieve at least maybe like for a start 10–12%, you know, interest rate before we get to the single digit and all of that. You know, it's a gradual thing, but I mean, you will agree with me, in the past 5 years, you know, mortgage financing has really, really improved in the country. A lot of people are beginning to see it as a means of actually owning their homes and all of that. There's still a whole lot of work to be done regarding that, but then we're moving in the right direction, you know, gradually.
All right, thank you so much for your time, Mr. Afolabi.
Thank you very much.
We've been chatting with Lanre Afolabi, a mortgage practitioner, and we hope that very soon we'll get the single-digit loans like he mentioned, and the housing deficit will come to an end. My name is Elsie Godwin. Thank you for watching.